Hello there, Padawan here, welcome back to another video. Today's video I'm going to be reviewing Star Wars Padawan. So to summarise the plot, Obi-Wan is in a state of constant anxiety. He's constantly comparing himself to other Padawans who seem to have a lot better relationships with their masters than he does. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon just don't seem to click as much as these other Padawans do with their masters. And what really adds fuel to Obi-Wan's concerns and worries is that he discovers that it wasn't actually Qui-Gon's choice to train Obi-Wan, it was the Jedi Council's. So he's kind of in a state of panic because there's also a rumour going about that Qui-Gon actually wants to leave the Order, and Obi-Wan's so convinced not only is he going to do this, but he's not even going to tell Obi-Wan about it, he's just going to disappear. So in order to try and prove himself that he can be a good Jedi, can be a good Padawan to Qui-Gon, kind of proposes a mission to Qui-Gon to visit this planet that a previous Jedi has visited, which has a really cool connection to the High Republic, which I won't spoil, but I was very happy to see that in the book. This trip will also get Obi-Wan away from the meditating as well, because that seems to be all that Qui-Gon wants to do with him. So Obi-Wan gets there nice and early, sets up the ship, makes sure everything's okay for this mission, and then just waits on Qui-Gon then, who appears to be running late, but because of all of Obi-Wan's fears and anxieties, he's so convinced Qui-Gon's actually not going to turn up. So in a small act of both rebellion and eager to prove his worth, Obi-Wan then sets off to this planet on his own, and then that's kind of where the adventure begins. So he goes to the planet of Lenara, where he meets a bunch of what appear to be Force-sensitive teens who are around the similar age to Obi-Wan. Now the planet seems to appear to be quite beautiful at first, but then Obi-Wan soon discovers that the planet itself actually seems to be attacking anybody who's on it. So these bunch of teens have found a safe place that they can stay, which they then take Obi-Wan to. But after Obi-Wan sees their living conditions, for example, there's a few of them who are aquatic type species, they're just sat in barrels for most of the day because they can't really go out anywhere. It's not safe to. So seeing the conditions that these kids live in, Obi-Wan can't help but want to help them, being the good Jedi that he is. But despite fighting for their survival every day, the teens are convinced that they must stay there because the previous generations have instructed them to. So the plot kind of revolves around Obi-Wan prolonging his stay in order to see what he can do to at least help these teens on this planet, try and get them off-world if he can, all whilst Obi-Wan's going through his own struggles and anxieties as well. So to go over the characters in this book, obviously we have Obi-Wan Kenobi himself. He is the prime focus of the book and gets the most attention. So Obi-Wan's main arc, as I mentioned before, is he's very distressed about whether he's good enough to be a Jedi, whether he's good enough for the Order, whether he's the right Padawan to Qui-Gon, and on top of that, the anxiety of the mission that he's just gone off on his own, and he's worried that he's going to come back to being kicked out of the temple anyway. Now, Obi-Wan's heart is clearly in the right place throughout the whole book. He clearly just wants to do good for the galaxy. He's aware he's got these powers that he's so lucky to have, and he wants to be able to use them for good. So it seems so obvious that being a Jedi is the right path for him, but that's again what starts the overthinking process for him. Now, Obi-Wan is pretty well written throughout the book. It's not the Obi-Wan that we know and love from, the Clone Wars era, or obviously he's nowhere near to the point where as he is in the originals, but it's nice to see him slowly go through the journey, especially if you've read Master and Apprentice, and then combined of course with The Phantom Menace. It's good to see his journey as a Padawan and how that evolves into him becoming a knight. He's a very sympathetic individual, and he's just a great example overall of what a good Jedi should be. So even when it comes to wanting to help these teens, he knows what the best thing for him is, but he still, out of respect, doesn't overstep, and at the very least wants to help improve their living conditions. So the teens I'm just going to kind of group into one character because none of them really stand out from each other than there's a girl called Orge, if I'm pronouncing that right. She's kind of like the group leader. There is kind of a democracy there, but she seems to have the final say of things. I think it was pretty difficult trying to remember who was who because they were all kind of introduced within the same page, and like what species they are and how they look, and then a few name drops. So I mean, that could just be me, but I struggle to remember who was who. Now they're very stubborn, they're very set in their way. They don't particularly enjoy living on this planet, but they feel like they have to, both because of their parents wanting them to stay there, and there is something they benefit from staying on the planet, which I don't want to spoil. I suppose I can speak about the planet itself being a character because it definitely feels it. It feels like this one big ecosystem. It seems very reminiscent of how both Obi-Wan and Yoda explain how the Force works, how everything is connected through the Force, and you definitely get that sense here. The planet is described to be this very beautiful place full of these like kind of wacky but interesting creatures, but also appears to be very dangerous towards anyone else who sets foot on the planet. Almost like they all kind of work together like a hive mind, kind of. I definitely really did enjoy the setting. It's almost as if the planet itself is alive, and the depending on, say, the mood of the planet. Depends on how safe it is to be there. I quickly want to talk about Qui-Gon Jinn as well. He's in this book very little, so I'd say if you're wanting to read this book thinking it's going to be about Obi-Wan's Qui-Gon's relationship, isn't really. So I'd definitely recommend Master and Apprentice instead. But the short time you spend with Qui-Gon is pretty good. He's very well written to be Qui-Gon. It's just a shame that he's not really in it much. So in terms of my opinion on the book, I'd say it's not an essential read, to be honest, and I do think it's wasted opportunity because, I mean, this is no fault of the author, I imagine, but if you're going to do a book solely focused on Obi-Wan himself as a Padawan, you'd think they'd do it about how Obi-Wan met Satine and his time on Mandalore, because you've already got a book about Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon as a, well, Master and Apprentice, hence the name, but this felt like it's such a wasted opportunity to not have that story. Now, I'm sure they're going to tell that story at some point in the future. Maybe it's something Dave Filoni himself wants to tell, but again, there's no fault of the author. So the plot itself is very simple, but I suppose it's because it's such a character-focused book. Seeing Obi-Wan slowly gain confidence was quite satisfying to see, especially since he didn't actually have a real reason to be that worried, be that anxious. He was just overthinking it all. But I'd say Obi-Wan himself is very well written, especially for someone around that age. I'm sure it's something many people can relate to or have experienced in the past. As I said previously, like, the teen survivors were pretty hard to tell apart since they were all introduced so quickly. So instead of trying to give them equal time spent on them characters, maybe just have a couple main ones and almost just maybe have the other ones as background characters. Like, we're aware they're there and we're aware of the stakes, but I just wish we got to learn about a few of them more individually, because they all just felt pretty samey to me. But the mystery of why they were there was pretty interesting, but I thought the planet itself was kind of more interesting than the survivors. I did really enjoy the setting, like I said in my Phasma review, because this is so primarily focused on one planet. They're able to do more world building, and the way it's described, it's a planet I'd really love to visually see. So whether that shows up in a TV show or, I mean, I doubt it's ever going to be in a Battlefront, but it would make a pretty cool map by the sounds of it. I wasn't huge on the ending. I feel like there was characters that needed to make choices, but their choices were kind of made for them, so it's quite unsatisfying, I thought. There's characters that are introduced towards the end as well that are quite forgetful. But overall, I'd say it was an enjoyable read. I wouldn't say it's a necessary read. I don't think it's really affected the Star Wars timeline or anything. And again, it just feels like wasted opportunity. But if you really like the character of Obi-Wan Kenobi and want to find out more of what he was like as a Padawan, then obviously this is the book for you. But I personally wouldn't recommend it unless it sounds like it's something you think you'd enjoy. But I definitely recommend reading Master and Apprentice, which shows the Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon dynamic. So in terms of giving a book a rating, for characters, I'm going to give it 2.5 out of 5, so it seems a little harsh, but really the only character that stands out is the main character himself, Obi-Wan Kenobi, whilst the teen survivors kind of grouped into one character, I feel like. So the concept of them, I think, works better than the execution. And then again, a few characters introduced towards the end that I didn't really care for, although there is a nice cameo which I won't spoil. In terms of the plot, I'll give it a 3 out of 5. It was an enjoyable read. It was enjoyable to see Obi-Wan gaining that independence, but I'd just say it wasn't anything mind-blowing. I'd say it was quite a safe plot, but watching Obi-Wan's journey was probably the most enjoyable aspect of it. In terms of pacing, I gave it a 4 out of 5. I'd say it's pretty decently paced, and the style of writing was pretty good, I'd say. It didn't really stand out as amazing or bad. It was just pretty good, I'd say, throughout. So this makes it come to 3 stars overall, so pretty good rating. It's an enjoyable read, but I just wouldn't say it's necessary, and I personally wouldn't recommend it, as I think there's other reads such as Master and Apprentice, and there's also other young adult books that I think are more enjoyable than this one. But if it sounds like a book you'd be interested in, I'd definitely say it's worth picking up. I don't think you'd ever regret picking it up to read, but there are just better options in my personal opinion. So that's all from me this video. Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to check the link in the description for all my socials. Let me know what you guys thought of this book if you've read it, or just what you're currently reading. Let me know in the comments. Thank you all very much for watching, and may the force be with you.